This is Real Life with Deb Waterbury, a real show for real people with real issues. And now, here's your host, Dr. Deb Waterbury.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Real Life with Deb Waterbury. I'm here with Karen Wendling, and we are going to be talking about some pretty interesting stuff today. We actually had a big conversation before we started this, because as all of us have issues with relationships that come to an end for whatever reason, and so we really thought that as we're doing this whole series on relationships, that we spent a little bit of time talking about what we do as believers, or just what do we need to do as women and men in the face of broken relationships, because I don't want to talk about how we break them, because we can break those. We break them fast, but what do we do in the sense of those, both as practically in our lives, but then as a believer, how should we handle that? Because there are steps to seek reconciliation. Right. But sometimes that doesn't even work. Right. So starting out then and talking about broken relationships here on the show today, Karen, what is the one of the things that you think causes relationships to be broken? Between friends, it can be a husband, it could be somebody in your family, right. but there's some real commonalities about what breaks up relationships.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like the expectations I put on that person. So it's like unmet expectations. Like I expected them to act a certain way, or I expected them to handle that a certain way, or I expected them to do something. Right. And then they didn't meet my expectations. And so then I'm let down. Right. And so then I'm frustrated or whatever because they didn't meet my expectations.
Yes. And the word that's coming to my head is betrayal. And the thing is it could be a real betrayal, but even that's an unmet expectation, because you expect someone that you're in a relationship with to not betray you. Right. I mean, that's just an expectation. Yeah. But it could be something much more minimal than that in terms of unmet expectations. But you're right, across the board.
Like I wanted you to vacuum and you didn't vacuum.
I can't be my friend anymore.
I left it right in the middle of the floor. I expected it. No,
if your marriage breaks up because of that, there's not much we can do for you. But I've lost. There's been so many broken relationships in my 56 years of life, and and obviously we're all the way from being a child all the way up. And many of those I grieve. Many of them I caused, and many of them I still don't know why they happened. But I can always go back to the same thing though, because even the ones that I caused, even back, and I do know why I did it, in my large betrayal of just everybody I knew, including the Lord, I did not meet expectations for the way a godly woman should behave, and so therefore there were relationships that I had that were broken beyond repair. Right. No matter what I tried to do to make them better. And it was an unmet expectation that I didn't meet. There's and then it's still in many friendships that I have now that I've lost over the years. Sometimes it's been because they didn't meet mine. And so I wonder if there's a different way, because the Bible gives us some really clear ways to handle when your feelings are hurt, because that's really it, isn't it?
Right.
At the end of the day,
your feelings are hurt, or you can just go like, okay, I have zero expectations. I have zero expectations. So if you meet my expectations, then you've really actually exceeded my expectations. Right. But that's not really as biblical as it probably should be.
But the thing is though, I do think though that's the beginning of godliness. Right. Because in terms of, and I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but we'll go back. In terms of who God is, if we can look at those people in our lives and don't expect them to be God, don't expect them to be Jesus.
That's good.
Because so that really is zero expectations. I mean, we should still expect people to act like humans, but even in that, humans are fallen. As long as I don't expect that person to be Jesus to me, which means they're going to respond perfectly or the way I need them to all the time. And that's never going to happen. Right. So when you say you have zero expectations, I think that's a step toward godly behavior. As long as we move that to, I have zero expectation of you because all my things have been met in Jesus. Right. Because, I had to do that even in my marriage. Jeff and I both, we talk about this all the time. I mean, our marriage we shouldn't be married right now. That in terms of all the things Jeff has done to me and all the things that I've done to him, in a human standpoint, we shouldn't be married. Our relationship should be broken, and it was broken for a lot of years. But what we came to, and what we tell everybody now, is that Jeff finally realized I couldn't be Jesus. And I finally realized Jeff couldn't be Jesus. And so then, if you, in my book, the latest one, The Lies That Bind, I dedicated it to Jeff. And it says the gravy on my mashed potatoes, because mashed potatoes. That's your. I'm from the South, obviously, so mashed potatoes. That's our sustenance, man. We don't have some mashed potatoes, and that's the good stuff. You put gravy on it, and it just gets better.
Right. You can't have mashed potatoes without gravy.
Well, you can.
You might be able to do some butter,
exactly.
but it's just not as good.
You can, yes, but the gravy just tops it off. It's not necessary, but it makes it better.
Right.
So Jeff then became the gravy. It became my gravy. And I remember the first time he heard me say that in a teaching. He was listening to me online, and he goes, I got home from work later, and he went, "So I'm gravy?" And I said, "Well, honey, that's a good thing." And that's really and truly what you're saying.
Right.
All of our relationships should be.
Yeah.
Everybody should be gravy on top of what we already have. Mashed
Right.
potatoes, if it's pancakes, it's syrup, whatever, it's the
Yeah.
thing that you put on top that makes it better if it's good, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, and for me, that's really easy for me to say, very hard to walk out in the day to day.
Oh my goodness. It is a perspective that you move toward, but not one that you will reach in this lifetime.
Although with some of my relationships, I feel like God has taken me back to that place.
Yes.
Hey, remind yourself again that you're broken, that you're fallen,
Yes.
that you're frail, that I have forgiven you 70 times 70, whatever,
Right.
times, and you need grace. They need grace.
Yes. And so that,
Because there's some I just want to be like,
yeah, I want to give
do you know what they've done?
Exactly.
You
yes.
know, you don't know what they've done.
Right. And honestly, I remember so many times calling my friend who's my mentor, and I would say, I just found out Jeff did this. He just did this, this, and this, and this, and I thought I was going to be justified in the. Finally, she's going to take my side. I mean, finally, because she never does. Finally, she's going to take my side and tell me you're justified in your anger. You should be mad at him. I remember one time in particular, I had the ammunition. Like I called her and I said, he did this, and I'm like laying him on the table going, this is going to get it. This is it. He did it. I can be mad. That's it. And she said, who do you think you are?
Right.
Why are you making this about you? At this moment, we need to pray for your husband, period. Right. This is not about you at all. And I'm, of course I had to get over being mad at her then. But that is truly an attitude. We fail at it all the time, but it's that outside perspective of, okay, all right. He's fallen just like I am. She's fallen just like I am. And offering grace in that, and then praying for them.
Amen.
Because there's so much that can happen when we pray for them. So, as I was thinking about talking about this, I think that we have two very distinct sides here, as we do in everything. There's God and there's Satan. So we have to decide. I had another very wise woman tell me one day that she said, Deb, you don't get a choice in life. If you don't choose God, then you've chosen Satan. It's not a matter of do I choose Satan or do I choose God.
That's good.
If you're not choosing God, then your choice is made. And so the truth of the matter then is, how would Satan want us to handle those things? And if you can figure that out, then avoid that. So what would Satan want us to do in a broken relationship? I mean, what does he want us to do?
Separate,
Yes.
cause division,
Right.
complain
Right.
to somebody else so that they'll get on your side.
Exactly. And
And
what does that do? That's gossiping. And so, and what does that say then about, what does that do to anyone watching me who's supposed to be a Christian?
It hinders your walk.
It absolutely
hinders
does.
your testimony.
It does.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the number one thing the enemy wants to do. He wants whatever job you have in this world to be thwarted by your own sin. And believe it or not, the way you deal with people who hurt you is going to be one of the major steps and one of the major ways you're going to either show Christ or not. I mean, when the rubber meets the road,
Right.
it is, people are going to look at you when you are being condemned or you are being in any way wronged. They'll watch you and they want to see how you deal with that. And if you deal with that like the world, then you're not set apart. You're not separate
Right.
from the world. And then that hinders them going, why do I want to be like her? I don't want what she has.
Right.
She's no different than everybody else.
Exactly.
So the Bible has a couple of ways that we're supposed to deal with them, and I have a few scriptures here, but then I want to talk about when that doesn't work. So so the Bible tells us there are three steps in restoring broken relationships. The first one is for us to be humble. And patient, which is difficult, especially when you've been wronged. And I get that from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2. Be always humble, gentle, and patient. Show your love by being tolerant with one another. Yeah, I know. And whenever they've messed with you, it's difficult to be tolerant because you're like, I want retribution now.
Yeah. Or when it happens again and again and again and again, the same stuff.
Yes.
It's like, oh, how can I tolerate that any further? And I'm not saying don't put up boundaries like we talked about.
Of course,
you have to put up boundaries with people that are toxic.
Absolutely.
You have to.
Absolutely.
And you have to separate yourself from people that are toxic. But you have to make sure that you are humble and that you still love them from afar.
Absolutely.
You still pray for them and all that. And when you see them, there isn't animosity. You don't like look the other way. You don't like go down the other row in the grocery store. Oh my gosh, there she is!
Yes.
Like you.
It's a heart issue.
Yeah.
Have you separated in that toxic relationship in order to then, protect yourself? But is your heart now embittered? Because once your heart becomes embittered, then we're in sin.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. We're not saying boundaries are wrong. We're saying heart issues can become wrong.
Yeah.
So in that, you have to be humble and gentle and kind and tolerant.
That's so good.
The next one is that you've got to be forgiving. And and that doesn't necessarily require reconciliation.
Right.
Or restoration of relationship. But it is something that happens. A forgiveness between me and another person really has something to do with that other person.
Right.
It's just me. It's me and God.
Right.
They're unaffected.
Exactly.
It's just, that's me. Yeah. So the Bible in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32 says, instead, be kind and tender-hearted to one another and forgive one another as God has forgiven you through Christ. Whew. It's pretty simple. I mean, and we've said this before, not easy. No. But not complicated.
Right. Well, I love what you said in the beginning, like it's a choice. It's either God or it's not. You're either going to choose to handle it God's way or you're not. Now, you're not going to do this perfectly because you are going to freak out and fume. Absolutely. And the first response is not going to be God necessarily like it should be. It's going to be flesh. That's going to be your first response. But I think the longer that you walk with God, and I think the longer that your heart is to want to do what God is doing in you, the easier it is for you to respond to that.
Absolutely. That's sanctification. That's what Paul talks about all the time, about running the race with diligence and running the race well, is becoming sanctified. The older you are, the longer you're a Christian, the more you do this, the better you get at it. You'll never get perfect, but you'll get better.
That's so good.
At it.
I heard somebody say one time, like, bitterness and unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
It is, right? That's such a good saying.
Because you're holding it on to yourself. It's like, you're holding it all in, and they're like drinking coffee. They're going about their merry way. And it's not, they don't even know that what is going on is bothering you
or do
at
they
all.
care necessarily?
Or do they
sometimes.
care? Yeah.
So forgiveness has nothing to do with that person. It is a means by which we honor what God tells us to do.
So good.
It is, and so again, it goes back to just like you said. You're either going to choose to do this, or it's over here. You're choosing not to, which is Satan. Right. You don't choose Satan.
It's either God or it's not.
It's God or it's him.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not making a choice here between the two.
I might have to tweet that. Do I have to give you credit? No, I'm just kidding.
You do. The last step in being able to deal in a godly way with a broken relationship is to communicate well. And I get this from James 1, chapter 1, verse 9. Remember this, dear friends, everyone must be quick to listen, but slow to speak and slow to become angry. And there's a progression there, a natural progression on purpose, that it's set for us to be quick to hear. If you're quick to listen and keep your mouth closed, then if you're also slow to speak out, your anger will stay in check, because anger mostly comes from this.
Right, not your ear.
If you're listening and you're listening to what's happening, you're listening to them, you're listening to the Lord, and then you keep your mouth closed and in check, then you will be so much slower to anger.
Right.
It really is I love the Bible. It is so practical. I mean, it is just, this is practical. This is good stuff, and it absolutely works. So if you do these things, if you're humble, you're forgiving, you communicate well, as in you're listening, you're not angry. If you are speaking, you're not speaking in anger, and you've moved toward reconciliation, and that person will not reconcile with you. What do you do then? What's the answer?
You have to let them go and just let God, you still pray for them. You just have to let it go, because you pursuing it when they don't want to be pursued. It's a relationship. I think Tyler Perry said at one time that friendships are like a tree. There's the leaves, there's the branches, and then there's the root. The leaves are a season. They're
Yes.
friends in and out. The branches are ones that are trying to remain. Now, you might be friends for a few years and then it's going to, then you have to cut off that branch. Like God is pruning that.
Right,
And
right.
sometimes God is pruning that branch and doesn't want that friendship to remain anymore.
That's right.
But we keep chasing after that friendship.
Right.
Trying to make it to remain. And God has removed that friendship from your life. And then there's other friends that are the roots. They're there
Yes.
through thick and thin. They've been there a long time.
That's such a good
us.
analogy. Yes, that's a great
And I've
analogy.
loved that analogy ever since I've heard him say that.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
And being able to let the Lord prune off some of those branches, many times it's because we want to hang on to those branches because we're hanging on to what we thought we had.
Right.
And we're not hanging on to what God has for us. And understanding that when relationships are broken and you've responded in a godly way, then you have to, as you said, rest in that and do not make this become a hard issue. Because at the end of the day, and I'll say this over and over again, when you stand before Jesus one day, he will not talk to you about that person.
No.
He's not even going to bring him up. Not going to bring anybody else up. He will just talk to you about you and just talk to you about your heart. So once you have to be sure you've done everything. You've been very, very patient. You've been kind. You have been forgiven, and you have tried to communicate. If you have done all those things, and the relationship still is not restored, then the ball's in their court.
Right.
But you can release while you, as you said, there's still connection because you're
Right.
still going to pray for them.
Yeah.
And you never allow your heart to become embittered.
Right. When you
because-
see them, it doesn't have to be weird.
Right.
Hey, I
This
haven't
is
seen you in a long time.
right.
Good to see you.
You have to just be
Yeah.
cautious of the sin in your heart.
Yeah.
And understanding that, broken relationships are always caused because one or both of you got angry about something or got your feelings hurt about something. Now you need to hear me say this. You are in control of how you respond. Nobody else is in control of how you respond. It's a big deal for me. It was a big deal for me to get to that, where I understood my response is my deal. Nobody else makes me respond anyway. I respond the way that I respond. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. It doesn't matter if they cuss me out. My response is still me. It's not theirs.
That's all you have to answer to God for
They
is
will
how you
never,
respond.
God will never talk to me about what they did to me. He will talk to me about how I responded.
Because you can't control how they're
No,
responding.
and you can't
have no
control what they
of-
do.
No, you have no control over that.
No, the only one you control is you. And so if you get angry, if you allow bitterness, if you don't seek restoration, that you can't blame anybody for that.
Right.
That's all you. So if you have an argument, if you have this ongoing thing with somebody where you're both tit for tat and all of that, then honestly, you got to take full responsibility for your part in that. Release them and ask for forgiveness for yourself, and then move on in that, because broken relationships are part of life. That's just the way it is. You're going to hurt people. People are going to hurt you. How do you respond in that? Because that's what we're going to answer for.
Yeah.
Is how we respond. It's not easy. Relationships are not easy. It's like marriage. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do.
Right.
But we serve a God of relationship. God wants relationship with us. Jesus has relationship with us. So therefore we, in our very imperfect way, emulate that with the people around us.
Right.
Our responsibility is how we do that, not what they do.
So good.
Yeah, this is I know this is not an easy thing, but obviously we're all going to fail at it sometimes.
And sometimes those branches that God trimmed, or maybe God didn't trim them, but you thought were severed, sometimes if you handle it right and it's done right, it can be engrafted back in.
Absolutely,
And a whole
yes.
good other fruit can come out of that.
Absolutely.
you know?
God is, He is the restorer.
Right.
And He makes
And-
beauty from ashes.
And some are worth fighting for like that.
Yes.
And then other ones you have to just say, okay, they were a leaf. I'm going to let them
Absolutely.
go,
And if they do come back and become a branch or become a root, then
Right.
that's all God, and God
Yep.
will deal with them. But it's all, you have to be responsible for
Yep.
how you do and what happens in your heart. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I'm looking forward to the next time that we get to see you. Thank you, Karen. First, she likes her
New
cup.
mugs!
We appreciate you. Come make sure you join us for the next episode of Real Life. Make sure you also subscribe so you know when our next episode comes up. And until then, God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Real Life with Deb Waterbury. I hope it's been a blessing to you as much as it was to me. If you want any of my books or information on articles or any of my speaking engagements, you can go to my website at debwaterbury.com. God bless you.